Evening, everybody. It is 6:03 p.m. on the 4th of February, 2021. I'm Mike Capuano. I am the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is Amelia Aboff, Sam Denning, Jahan Habib, and Rob Buchanan. We have a full contingent of the planning board this evening. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020, this meeting of the Planning Board will be conducted via remote participation. We will have an audio recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. We have two items on the planning board's agenda this evening. The first is the opening of a public hearing for 337 Somerville Avenue. And the second is a piece of other business, which is the elections for the planning board. So what I'd like to do now is ask the clerk of the planning board, Sam Denning, to read in the notice of public hearing for 337 Somerville Avenue.
337 Somerville Avenue, Union Square Ventures LLC seeks modifications to the conditions of the previously issued special permits, Planning Board 2016-09 and Planning Board 2016-09 R1 0317. Applicant will separately seek removal of the related condition imposed by the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Thank you, Sam. What I'd like to do now is invite the applicant and or the applicant's representative to be unmuted and address the planning board and the public on the application.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca Cooper speaking. I am recognizing Adam Dash, who's raised his hand. I'm unmuting him. Mr. Dash, you're ready to go.
Thank you. You can hear me?
Yes, Adam.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville. I'm here representing Union Square Ventures LLC, which is the owner of Unit 2 at the condominium, of which is made up of the Bow Market and Union Square. This is an application to amend the 2016 approval in order to alter a condition related to the square footage use caps that were put in place at that time. Just for background, this property is a commercial condominium of 4 units. The largest unit is the one in the rear, which is the Bow Market complex, of which most people are familiar. But there are also 3 units in the front. There is the Sally O'Brien's as a unit, the Somerville Community Corporation offices as a unit, and my client's vacant storefront on Somerville Avenue is another unit. So what we're doing here is my client's storefront has been vacant for about 3 years, you may have noticed. He's been trying to lease it, but tenants keep having to not go forward because of the use caps that are in place. The intent of the original condition 1 in the approval was for the caps only to apply to the rear market unit and not to the other 3 units. And this needs to be changed to reflect that so that my client can get tenants and into the space. That's the short summary of what this is about. It's more of a, it's a technical change, but it does allow my client's unit to be marketable.
Great, thank you, Adam. I don't know if there's anybody else on your side that wants to make any sort of a presentation, or if I can kick it over to staff, you let me know.
There's no one else. Julian Lewis, the principal from Union Square Ventures LLC, is here if the board wanted to talk to him, but I don't think there's anything else to add to what I just said. It's fairly straightforward.
Okay, nice, Adam. I would like to ask Charlotte to be unmuted if she is not already, so she can go over the staff memorandum and the proposed conditions before I open it up to public testimony. I just everybody listening can be on notice as to what the staff is recommending as conditions to be able to address the concerns that have been raised by the applicant.
This is Charlotte Lee speaking, planner in OSPCD. So as Adam said, this is primarily a clarification of the original condition number 1. When originally written, condition number 1 was basically a compound condition. It was trying to do multiple things in one package, and that has led to, especially with the zoning change to the current zoning, it's led to confusion on part of the applicants and staff and kind of everyone of what exactly is permitted. So this revision is to simplify and clarify what the intent of that condition was. So in the staff memo, it goes over kind of where that condition was proposed in the original planning board and ZBA decision, since the decisions were essentially identical. And it was proposed specifically in relation to the neighborhood business / fab portion of the site, which is the rear portion. Last week when the staff memo was published, staff's understanding of the applicant's request regarding the front units was that the applicant was requesting to have the front units be regulated by the new zoning rather than by this condition number 1 that was under the previous zoning that applied to this condition and the entirety of the property. Yesterday, the applicant expressed a desire to staff to change that, and at the ZBA last night proposed a revision to that 3rd condition, identifying which portions of the site are exempt from condition number 1. And they requested that rather than exempting all of the front site from condition number 1 and 2, just to exempt the front site from the use caps of condition number 1. So the use table of condition number 1 would apply, but the caps of condition number 1 would not apply to the front site. And I will send into the chat for the board and everyone present to see what that revised condition language would be. It is giving me a hard time with copying and pasting.
Okay. Charlotte, is this something the ZBA heard this in a meeting that was earlier this week?
Yes, the ZBA, the revised condition number 3 was proposed to the ZBA last night at the public hearing, and they were comfortable with it and moved forward. But obviously, you're a different board. It is what the ZBA does not have to dictate what you do.
Yeah.
Give me one moment to type it out so that everyone has it, and then we can move forward. For the record, it is instead of exempt from conditions 1 and 2, it is exempt from the square footage caps of the permitted principal uses listed in condition number 1. That's the modification to condition number 3.
Charlotte, this is Rebecca speaking. I think it would be a good idea once you get the text posted to also read it out for the record so that everybody can hear it as well as see it.
Yes, I will read the entirety of it for the record.
Thank you.
What I'd also like to do is if you could explain the practical application of what you have proposed in your condition 3 and the practical application of the proposed change.
So I've just sent the proposed or the revised proposed condition number 3 to everyone. The condition number 3, as the applicant requested from the ZBA last night, is any commercial space or principal structure with a principal entrance onto Somerville Ave is exempt from the square footage caps of the permitted principal uses listed in condition number 1. So the condition number 3 that is currently in the staff or in the staff memo that was received by the board basically exempts the front, I'm going to refer to it as the front site, but it's meant to be any commercial space or principal structure with principal entrance onto Somerville Ave. That's what I mean by front site. So the original condition number 3 exempts the front site from these use caps and from the permitted use list of condition number 1. So rather than these front sites relying on the permitted uses in condition number 1, they would be subject to the new zoning, the MR5 zoning, the pedestrian street zoning, all of that. And the applicant felt that that would be ambiguous to potential people coming in, since it is this site has existing non-conforming uses, and so the total list of uses that could be established on the front of the site is kind of an amalgamation of a few different uses, and so requested that instead this current condition be applied, which the front site would be limited to just the uses in condition number 1, and the uses in condition number 1 would be the permitted uses for the entirety of the site, although only the rear of the site would have the caps apply. The office space, for example, in the front of the site would not be limited by that cap, but also would not count towards that cap. And there is currently office space and restaurant in that front portion of the site. Is that clear?
I think it is to me, yeah. So if effectively what I think you're saying is by keeping the existing change, it takes the front portion of the building, which is the street facing, pedestrian facing portion of the, did we lose Amelia?
I'm back now. Yes, you lost me. I heard the beginning part of Charlotte's explanation to what I believe was the last question.
Okay, great. So what I understand is, I think you've got the street facing part of the site, which is Sally O'Brien's and another storefront at 203. And then you've got the back space, which is the Bow Market kind of interior space. I think what you're saying is the condition that you proposed would have the front facing sites that are actually on Somerville Avenue be subject to the uses that are that were contemplated in the new zoning, but the Bow Market part in the back would be exempt from those uses. Is that right?
Yes. So
Right,
the condition in the staff report, or the condition number 3 as written in the staff report, would have the front portion of the site subject to the new zoning and the rear portion of the site subject to condition 1 and 2 of this permit, which
was originally executed under the old zoning.
correct, which was originally executed under the old zoning.
Just want to make sure I understood. So I am kind of, when I look at this, I do look at almost 2 separate areas of the site, even though it's under one ownership. Okay. Thank you. I'm glad that you clarified that, and I'm glad I understand what it is that the differences are that are being proposed. So I don't know if any other members of the planning board have any questions of staff at the moment, or of the applicant, or I should open the public testimony. Yes, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had just one clarifying question. Does the new zoning, which I understand will now, if this is approved, apply to the front part of the site, does it allow ground floor office at that location?
So the condition, if the condition in the staff report is approved, I am not entirely certain whether office would be permitted. So the reason that I'm not certain, or that office would be permitted in that ground story location, the reason I'm not certain is because office is an existing use on the site, because there's already office there, and I don't know whether it is a conforming use or a non-conforming use because it currently exists on the second floor. Yeah, so that is my answer. I cannot say for certain whether office would be permitted in that ground floor if this project were entirely and only under the new zone, rather than having condition number 1 apply to the front spaces.
I see Julian Lewis's hand having been raised. I'd like to be able to unmute Julian Lewis, so might be able to be get some clarification on this.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Mr. Lewis, I have unmuted you. You are self-muted.
Thank you. Good evening. This is Julian Lewis, Union Square Ventures. I'm the owner of the condominium. So I just wanted to clarify that the condition, the reason that we, initially went for relief and to amend this condition is because we had several tenants that wanted to take the space, both a spa and a cafe. And when they went and spoke with the city basically made the determination that the use caps applied to condominium 2, and the city asked us to come and remove the use caps. And what we've kind of worked with planning with, and Boyes Watson, the Bow Market owners have also worked with planning on is bifurcating condition 1, which listed the allowed uses for the entire site, and which listed the use caps for what the city determined was for the entire site, and to make those use caps only apply to Bow Market, as they have a plethora of different uses in smaller spaces, and we're dealing with a 4,400 square foot retail space that's on the street. And so that's kind of the purpose of this, is to make the caps that were never intended to apply to our unit only apply to the rear portion of the site, while maintaining the use table of permitted uses that we have with our special permit from 2016. And hopefully be able to fill a retail space that's been vacant for 3 years. With respect to the office, and Adam may be able to elaborate a little more on it, we did receive a special permit for the space, Duvine Bike. They're Fast Pedal LLC. They are technically an office use, and they did receive a special permit about a year ago to occupy the space, and that deal ended up not coming to fruition because of the virus and the conditions, the economic conditions of their business. So I don't know if that use is grandfathered from the special permit. That would be a question for Adam Dash, because he did represent Fast Pedal in that application that was approved. So just that's all I have to say for now, and happy to answer any further questions that the board has.
Thanks, Julian. Adam, could you answer the discrete question of whether the office use was a permitted use or was not?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Adam Dash again. You may recall back in December 2019, it was actually right before the new zoning passed, that I was before you over at the high school auditorium with Divine Cycling, which is a cycling touring company, and you granted special permit for them to open up their offices in this location. Before they could do that, the pandemic hit, the travel industry tanked, and they did not go forward. So that special permit still exists, and because the deadlines on special permits expiring has been told during this pandemic emergency by the governor, that office use is still there for another office tenant to come in, should that be what Mr. Lewis wanted to do. As you've heard, that's not what what kind of tenants he's getting now. So office in particular is some kind of a special category, just because the Divine approval sort of pulls that out of the rest of this. What we're trying to do here is and what the zoning board approved last night is the revised language for condition 3 that Charlotte put in the chat. That's what that revised language in condition 3 is, what the zoning board approved last night. And what that does is it simplifies things greatly for us, because rather than a proposed tenant or future ISD person flipping through the old code and the new code and trying to figure this out, which has been kind of the problem right now, is there will just be the list and number in condition 1, and these are the things. But those caps of square footages for each use won't apply to, and not just our unit, but the SCC and Sally O'Brien's as well, because those caps were not really ever meant to apply to those, but from what I understand, back in 2016, however, the way it was worded, they have been applied, and that's been where we've been stuck. We're not trying to do any other change here. At least we're not.
Thanks. Thanks, Adam. Does anybody else have any questions right now, or can I open it up to testimony? I am at this point going to open up this public hearing to testimony for anybody that wants to speak on the application. There are only 5 people in attendance, one of whom is the applicant and the other is the applicant's attorney. So we've really got 3 folks that I think are not affiliated directly with the applicant. If you want to provide testimony, I would ask you to do the raised hand function, and I will call on you in the order in which I see you. Okay. Going once. Going twice. Seeing nobody, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up for discussion by the planning board to staff. Does anybody have any thoughts on this? I think I have some, but I would like to hear where you are at. So my thought is this, and I think I agree with the way that Charlotte has drafted the original condition, because what I think we effectively have, even though it is one site, it is 2 sites, right? There are very, very few lots that we see that can realistically be bifurcated into a space that's behind everything else and then a street facing site. Because Bow Market in the back is governed under the old zoning, because that permit was granted, I think we gave it to them in 2016. We've got a completely new code, right? So part of that code and part of the intent behind that code was to activate and have specific uses and methodologies for how street facing and pedestrian facing parcels work. There aren't many other places where you can have the front part of the place and then the back part, which is kind of totally separate. So I actually don't think it's terribly complicated to be able to say you've effectively got 2 lots. The front part that everybody sees is going to be subject to the new zoning, which is what everybody's going to see as they come down Somerville Avenue with all the surrounding parcels on that block and heading into the square. And then what you've got in the back. Nobody's going to know what's in the back just by driving necessarily down the street, because you're going to see what's facing you, which is the intent behind why we enacted the new zoning to begin with. Many reasons. So my inclination is to go with what Charlotte has originally proposed, which is to impose 2 different set of guidelines and zoning restrictions on them, because it's kind of a unique parcel in that they really are kind of 2 distinct parts of a property that we're not going to see very, very often. I think it gives this board a little bit more flexibility in the future in case something comes up down the line. We know where we are. I think Charlotte's proposed condition is streamlined and gives us kind of the wherewithal to maneuver as necessary down the pike. So I would be inclined to diverge from the ZBA's vote, because we are not subject to that, and instead go with what the staff in its infinite wisdom has determined is the best condition language on condition number 3. So I don't know if anybody would like to add any comment to that. Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have a question on the proposed language as written in the version that we received. Am I right to understand that the back parcel or back condo unit, businesses that, sorry, am I correct to understand that something in the street facing condo units would then not be contributing to the total maximum caps for the uses that still apply to the back condo units?
This is Charlotte speaking. Yes, under both scenarios, whether we do the condition in the chat or the condition on the staff memo, in neither of those cases would uses on the front count towards the caps of condition number 1, because they are in both cases exempt either explicitly just from the caps of condition number 1 or exempt from the entirety of condition number 1, including the caps.
So just for consideration, I would ask whether there's a way we can clarify the language on that point, because I find that this, as written, reads to suggest that the front parcels are not subject to the restriction that the back area is subject to, but I can imagine a future review of this interpreting that the back parcels could be impacted by a count of the front parcels in one of those use categories. And maybe I'm overthinking it, but that was difficult for me to parse when I thought about it from the perspective of a business coming into the back condo units.
This is Charlotte speaking. I think staff pretty universally understand it as because they are exempt from condition number 1, they also, but by not being ruled by condition number 1, they can also not affect condition number 1. It would be somewhat of a double standard for them to be able to count towards the caps without the caps applying to them, because if the caps don't apply to them because condition number 1 doesn't apply to the front portion, and we ended up with 5,000 square feet of office in the front portion, that would inadvertently prevent the back portion from having any office at all, because the front portion would be exceeding the cap that doesn't apply to them. So I understand the desire to make sure it's clear, but I think as staff have written it, it is clear to staff and to ISD that the caps would not be impacted by whatever uses are at the front portion of the site.
Thank you.
I had a question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess my thought on this is I think this is what I am supportive of. I think that I guess on principle that the front of the site be held to no more restrictive or excessive restrictions than the current zoning. Like that principle I would be supportive. Just basically we want the front to be under the current zoning. I guess where I'm pausing is this condition number 2 about sort of not requiring a special permit. I mean, I feel like, is that more permissive than the current zoning? And I'm asking in particular about the office, because for some reason I thought storefront office, you can do it, but only by special permit. So are these conditions basically saying no special permit would be required, putting aside the existing one with respect to the bike business? And maybe that's
Charlotte speaking. To confirm, the scenario that you're asking about is the scenario in the staff memo, correct? Because the so I guess I can address them both. So as written in the staff memo, with condition number 3 saying both condition number 1 and condition number 2 do not apply to the front site. In that situation, if the current zoning, the MR5 and pedestrian street zoning required a special permit for a use, that requirement would apply. In the scenario with the revised condition, the condition in the chat box, the only uses that would be permitted on that front site and throughout the property are the uses in condition number 1, and moving between those uses would not require a special permit for any of the spaces on the property. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I mean, I guess I'll just say I think the language that you had suggested in the staff memo, I guess that seems sufficient to me. I guess I'm trying to understand what the revised language that the ZBA adopted, how that is more clear. Maybe I'm just getting confused.
So the revised language that the ZBA adopted is both versions of condition number 3 could be understood to be the intent of the original condition number 1. Because the original condition number 1 was written in a unclear manner, there are multiple ways to interpret it, and I could interpret condition number 1 as intending to do either of these 2 sets of conditions. Does that make sense? So my understanding, and the applicant may be able to speak to this better, but in talking to the applicant, my understanding of why they have requested this revised condition number 3 that the ZBA adopted rather than the condition number 3 in the staff memo is because having a clear, distinct list of uses that they can hand to prospective tenants and say, if you are one of these uses, you are permitted, and if you are not one of these uses, you are not permitted. I think they felt that was attractive and straightforward, whereas the condition number 3 that's in the staff memo does not provide that same level of clarity of exactly what uses are permitted in that front site, because the uses that are permitted in the front site would be a mixture of the uses permitted by the current MR5 pedestrian street zoning and the non-conforming uses on the rest of the site, which is just not quite as clean as a list of 8 or 9 explicit line item uses. So the applicant may be able to explain further, but that's my understanding of why they're requesting the language that the ZBA approved.
I see Mr. Lewis's hand raised. I'd like to be able to recognize him for a second.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Mr. Lewis, you're unmuted.
Yes, thank you. If I may, so one thing to keep in mind is for a little background is exactly what the initial condition 1 in the special permit from 2016 was, and that was both the caps and the permitted uses. So both of those items were in condition 1. So for the last year and a half, the caps have condition 1 has applied to condo 2, which is the storefront in Somerville Ave that we're discussing, and so the caps have applied, and when we're trying to have a tenant go in, we're having issues, obviously, because our space is larger than what all the caps are. We're also split. Our space is half in MR5 and the rear portion is in fabrication. So we're split between 2 different zones. And when you throw in the pedestrian designation and the caps, our space has basically been rendered, unleasable. So, and essentially and I think Charlotte, you'd mentioned this, whether or not, since we're existing non-conforming under that special permit, any of the current uses on the site, we would be hypothetically allowed to put into our space. Is that accurate, Charlotte? And so what we're saying is, instead of, there's definitions under the old zoning of what those uses are. There's different definitions under the new zoning of what those allowed or existing uses on the site are. that would be non-conforming and that we'd be able to expand into our space. And so what we're saying is, why don't we just clarify what we're able to put in the space? So I don't, I think that would be the most effective way to clarify that. Because if we're subject to the existing zoning, we have fabrication, MR5, pedestrian street, all in one space. So I don't know if there are any uses that would be allowed in the space, since we're kind of whipsawed between a couple different zones.
Sam, I see you wanted to speak.
Yeah, just briefly. It sounds like there isn't a huge practical difference between the exemption as written or the condition as written in the staff memo versus the one proposed by the applicant. I think I was persuaded by Charlotte's reasoning that having a list of uses could be beneficial to prospective tenants to showing that. And I know we're not bound by what the ZBA did, but if we don't have a good reason to go with something else, it seems like for making everyone's life a little bit easier, it seems like we could go with the same thing. If someone has a good reason to go with what's in the staff memo instead of what the applicant proposed, I'm open to that, but it seems like there might be an easier option.
I could go either way. I mean, clearly the ZBA acted. When I found out what the ZBA did, I do think what Charlotte proposed is cleaner in the way that the conditions are written. But I think practically, I think you're right. It probably doesn't make all that much difference. I mean, I could go either, and I think it's kind of at the discretion of the board and where we sit on this. I honestly don't know. I could go either way. So if somebody has a motion to adopt and make findings and adopt the staff amendment when those proposed conditions or the conditions as proposed to be amended by the applicant, I think someone should make a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion. So I would motion that we adopt the conditions as drafted in the staff memo and with the amended condition as adopted by the ZBA for condition number 3. So essentially adopting what the ZBA approved.
We have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay. Rob has moved. Sam has seconded.
Can we just wait
yeah,
1 second? It looks like Amelia is frozen.
He's frozen. Can we hear Amelia?
This is Charlotte speaking. It appears that Amelia, her status appears to be offline, so it may be prudent to wait until that status returns to not offline.
I noticed that too. I thought maybe she just nodded off.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I will attempt to reach out to Charlotte and see what happened. And we just lose Sam as well.
Okay.
No, I just accidentally clicked the wrong button. That's user error.
Can we confirm that all 5 of us are present and accounted for and can hear and speak? No, you good? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So we've got a motion by Rob to adopt the conditions as proposed amended by the applicant with that condition number 3. It was seconded by Sam. So we do a roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Okay. Congratulations and good luck to the applicant. That's all the official business that the board has. We just have some other business that we should attend to. So if you want to be part of the planning board staff elections, you can stick around. If not, you can log off. So we've got elections. We've got the 3 elected positions, chair, vice chair, and clerk. Right now, I'm the chair, Amelia is the vice chair, and Sam is the clerk. Rob, as the alternate, cannot serve in one of those roles. So the only other person who would be able to have an official title with the planning board would be Jahan. I don't know if Jahan has an interest in taking title.
No interest at this time.
Okay. Well, you're always welcome. And honestly, you've got your hands full of will with the CPC. All right. So in that case, I would move that the roles in the planning board continue as in 2021 as they were in 2020. I don't know if anybody else has any further discussion on that business. The chair moves. I think we should go roll by roll just so it's clear for the record. The chair nominates Amelia to serve as the vice chair of the planning board for the 2021 calendar year.
Second.
Seconded by Sam. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Jahan
Amelia
votes
votes
aye.
aye.
Rob
Aye.
votes aye.
Amelia, did you vote?
I did. Sorry, Amelia votes aye.
Okay, so we have a unanimous vote. The chair moves to nominate Sam as the clerk of the planning board,
Seconded.
seconded by Jahan. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam enthusiastically votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Okay. Has someone got a nomination for chair?
The vice chair makes a motion that Mr. Capiano continue as chair.
Seconded.
Seconded by Sam. Roll call vote.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. We have a list of positions that have been voted on by the planning board for the 2021 calendar year. And when is our next meeting, Rebecca?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks. That would be February 18th.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Have a nice night. And the chair votes to adjourn, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Thank you all. Have a nice night. See you in a couple of weeks.
Have a good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Good night.